Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took exception.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. Ja Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me. Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win edition. My name is Keith Parrish. I'm joined by Chris Herrington, who comes on every couple weeks or so. Chris, good morning. How are you?
What's up? I'm barely making it. I'm barely roused myself out of bed after a late night at FedEx Forum.
I mean, it was a late night. It could have been later. This was initially was it an 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. local tip or something?
Yeah, no, that would have been rough. That would have been rough. But it moved up to 6:30. But let me tell you, they took their time after the game. They made up for it.
Right. I want to say there was some post-game quotes leaking out that were very hilarious and candid, and we'll get to it in a second, but they were leaking out late where I saw them come on the timeline. I'm like, I haven't seen this before. I'm like, oh, this just dropped. It's like 11 p.m. and
there was a lot of standing around by various media members in between the end of the game and actually being able to write and leave the building. A lot of standing around. Yeah.
Well, it was a huge win for the Grizzlies, a much-needed win over the detestable, hated Golden State Warriors. It also was something needed sorely for the team and the fan base. Like, things were dark. I actually recorded on Thursday. I recorded like a 15-minute episode reacting to all the news of like the past couple of days. Like, oh, Steven Adams is now out 4 more weeks. Ja Morant's officially going to be out at least 4 more games. Draymond Green destroyed Dillon Brooks in a podcast, and I just didn't release the episode. I'm like, this is just I was like, it's just too dark. there was no upside. I'm like, we're gonna play the Warriors like 6 hours. No one wants to hear this, I don't think. I mean, maybe people would have, but I decided to can it.
The Everybody Hurts episode of Grit and Grinds.
Well, it's like I'm like super down about the Brandon Clark injury, where I was like, that is a huge blow to the Grizzlies in my mind, and that takes their ceiling away. And I'm like, that's just I don't think we're any good now. I mean, we're good, but like, we thought we were going to win a title, or we had like a 10% chance at a title a couple of months ago. So I've already put all these episodes where I'm like, there's no silver lining to losing Brandon Clark. Like, it's just bad. And then on the heels of that, to be like, oh, hey, Steven Adams is now out for the rest of the regular season, basically. And there's no silver lining to that either. The Grizzlies are going to be extremely shorthanded in the front court for every single game remaining. They're going to be bad at rebounding for every game remaining. And if Steven Adams doesn't come back for the playoffs, season's over in my mind. Like, we can't win a playoff route. Are you in a similar headspace?
Well, I'm thinking beyond this season. To me, the bummer of the Brandon Clark is it's not just right now; it's next season too.
Right?
It's basically, maybe he's back in time for the playoffs next season. But I think, given the Grizzlies' caution around injuries, I wouldn't even count on that. And even if he is back in time for the playoffs next season, he's probably not himself for at least another year, if that. Right. And so. And then you factor in just like, the what that means for the Grizzlies in terms of, having $12 million and dead money for next season on their books, and the limited flexibility that has in the offseason. There's just a lot of trickle-down effects beyond the current moment for the Brandon Clark injury. With the Steven Adams, I'm not like, I don't think we're going to see him again. I bet we don't even see him for the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how concerned to be about him going into next season. I've heard a lot of speculation on that front, but I think it's speculation that's based on nothing. Like people saying, well, he'll end up having surgery. I got no idea about, I don't know about that. I would certainly hope you get Steven Adams back 100% before next season or for next season. In the short term, I just think it's time to recalibrate expectations, and maybe given their struggles even before, we were already there. And so to me, even if you get Ja back ahead of the playoffs, to me, like, the new goal is like win a playoff series. I'm not even thinking beyond winning in the first round. I think winning in the first round is asking a pretty good bit right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately where I'm at. I mean, with the loss of Steven Adams for even if it is the minimum of 4 weeks they're talking about, like we're now at like watch the standings, like where are we going to slip and slide? Can we, obviously beating the Warriors was a big deal, even if they are terrible on the road, but like that's an important win to snap the Grizzlies' own 3-game losing streak. And you're probably not going to slide to the play-in. Like that's 6 games. I believe you're ahead of the Mavericks, but also like the Mavericks play you 3 times. They have the option of helping themselves out big time. But like, even if you assume you're going to stay in that top 6 and what looked to be a certain home court advantage first round is going to be like, maybe not. And so
I think they're pretty, I think the win at Golden State was big. So the two teams, if your floor you're concerned about is the 4 seed,
yeah,
the two teams to be most worried about were Golden State and Dallas, who you played 5 more times in the next 7 games. You just won 1 or 2 against Golden State, and so that's kind of crazy to think that they're going to get them again real soon. But I think it's hard for Golden State now. I think, and now Dallas. Now, if you lose all 3 to Dallas, then yes. Now that is in peril, but I think you almost have to lose all 3 to Dallas. I just think that's a lot of cushion with now 17 games to go. I think there's real danger in the Grizzlies slipping down to 4. I have a hard time seeing them going lower than that. And even that, I wouldn't. Now that Kevin Durant's injured, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're getting slight breaks as Grizzlies fans with the loss of Kevin Durant for a few weeks. You would hope you could hold off. You're 5.5 up on the 4 seed right now. So yeah, hopefully that will hold. But also, even with home court advantage, if it is now you're playing the Clippers or the Suns or the Warriors or whoever, Mavericks in the first round, I'm with you where I've now lost all enthusiasm for this matchup. Like, I mean, honestly, if I have to pick, it's don't lose to like the Timberwolves. Like, I would rather lose to a more I'm going to call it prestigious franchise. I would rather lose to Kyrie and Luka than lose to like Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've lost enthusiasm. I would say my expectations have been lowered. But like, I mean, last night, obviously, they won that game big against Golden State. The game was a blast. And like, it was sort of a reminder of like, hey, like, there's a certain floor to this enterprise if you like basketball, because like we got an NBA team. And like, I'm sitting here watching an NBA game, that's cool. I like that.
I feel like we're moving the goalpost a little bit, Chris.
Well, I've been from day one. I've said this. I am not the live and die by whether your team wins and loses guy. I've never, ever, ever been that.
Yeah.
I have always, from the day one the team got here, I have said part of enjoying the NBA, this is not college.
Yeah.
The basketball is good. Part of enjoying this is enjoying having an NBA team. There's only 30 of them. Like, it's cool to be able to go see NBA games and to watch NBA players and to follow an NBA tean. It's cooler when they're good, but it's always a good thing to have. Right. And like, I love,
well, I mean, it's a healthy, game, right? It's a healthy, good perspective to not be so attached to like the hopes and like the on-court performance. I mean, I am still I do tell people like I have joy watching all the games still, but I do have to recognize the fact that like for a lot of the last year, I was like, this is the best sports team I've ever cheered for.
Right.
I was like, this could be the best sports team I've ever cheered for in any sport. Maybe like the McNair Titans or for a year or something. But like, this is like, we look like we're going to be one of the 5 best teams in the NBA, and we could be for a long time. And they still might, because of course the core is young. Bane, Morant, Jaren, very, very young. But to go from that a month ago or midway through January when the team was 34-13 to now be like, we're just hanging on for dear life. And it feels far from certain that we'll advance past the first round of the playoffs. And that is, sure. I feel like a bummer.
But like, I mean, these detours create their own journeys, right? And so it's interesting to watch. The guys still playing matter too, not just now, but going forward. And so it's interesting. Like, I think it's great to see the more touches being forced to Jaren Jackson and him consistently producing with that. I think I never got around to this last night because I never updated my game story. So I sort of detoured the other ways, but I really think Jaren, one like little thing I'm starting to notice is like, I think he's recognizing double teams and passing out of them better. And the fact that he is getting more touches and being asked to do more and creating more offense more consistently, I think it's going to pay dividends down the line beyond just this season. I think, there's things to learn about a lot of these players. There's decisions to make. I don't know. I mean, I have lost interest in the season. I do think it's a real bummer, the things that have happened, and certainly my expectations have been lowered.
Yeah. So Jaren Jackson Jr. had 21 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, which is a big time about. Sharing the basketball game for Jaren. But in his last 3 games, without Ja Morant, Jaren is averaging 23.7 points per game, and he's doing it on pretty good efficiency. He's knocked down at least 2 threes in each of those games. So like Jaren is clearly stepping up. A lot of the fan base, your frustration with some of the Clippers and Lakers losses is it feels like maybe the team went away from Jaren at times in the second halves of those games. But yeah, you're right. So Jaren has a big game. Also, do you think there's anything to the Grizzlies' random increase in made 3-pointers? I mean, we know 3-pointers are always a variance, a highly variable thing.
I doubt that.
Yeah.
I do think the ball is being shared a little more and moving around a little more. I think the offense has gotten a little less heliocentric, a little less, individually oriented in terms of Ja. It is notable, like 48 points in the first quarter against the Warriors, 51 in the third against the Clippers.
Yep.
And so, like, broadly speaking, the offense, I don't know what the numbers are like in terms of, net rating, or what, not net rating, but offensive rating in these games. I haven't looked at the big numbers. But the sense is not just broadly speaking, the offense can't score. There have been stretches, especially in the fourth quarter, where the offense can't score. There have been stretches in that Clippers game. It was more of a defense problem than an offense problem, with Dillon Brooks out and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are going off. Rebounding, period, a problem. That's the consistent problem with Steven Adams out, is rebounding, I would say. But I think depth is a problem. I mean, the thing last night, there's a trickle down effect, right? Like of these injuries. In terms of the first line, I think they've done pretty well. If you look at with Adams and Ja out, so okay, fine, we're running out Tyus Jones, who's been great as a starter this season. He's had some down stretches to his season, but when he's asked to start, he's been spectacular. So you got Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson, Xavier Tillman. That's not a team that's winning a title, but that's a good NBA team.
Yeah.
The problem is like, when Taylor Jenkins in the first half sticking to his 10-man rotation, now, you're putting Roddy and Zaire Williams on the floor together without a point guard, and that did not go well. And so there's a trickle down effect in terms of the depth. He still is not, he cut it from 10 to 8 in the second half, but he is not, he has not gone full bore. We're playing playoff style rotations yet.
Yeah. So I want to highlight a few of the things you said with a couple of stats. First of all, the thing you said about the rotation, it was notable, like you pointed it out on Twitter, like that the start of the second quarter where the Warriors immediately cut it down to 6 points. It was against a non-point guard second unit that featured Roddy and Williams. It was Aldama as the only player over 6.
Aldama at center.
Yeah. Like it was and no power forward. And it went horribly. Like Zaire Williams made both of his shots, but committed 3 turnovers and had his teeth kicked in for 5 minutes when the Grizzlies got scored by 14. It was,
and that was against
painful.
Curry and Draymond.
Right.
There were 3 other players on the floor too with the Warriors. I don't remember who they were.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, that was Curry and Draymond.
Yes. And then in the second half, I thought very notable. You said it. I'm going to repeat it for emphasis. 8-man rotation in the second half. And I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember the last time in a regular season game the Grizzlies played an 8-man rotation. Usually it's like we do 10-man first half. Oh, let's get serious. 9-man second half.
That's right.
They've been doing that frequently, but an 8-man, the only bench players being Conchar, Roddy, Conchar, Aldama, and Kennard. I think that is like, if we have to win a game, that clearly makes sense to everybody. That like those are the 8 guys we're rolling with.
Another thing that made me say in the second half of that game last night, and I never wrote this or tweeted this or anything. I did mention it to Jeff Calkins, who was sitting beside me in the moment. He leaned a little more Conchar than Kennard.
Kennard played I think like 6 or 7 minutes in the second half.
I mean, there was a particular moment where I sort of where he had a choice to make, one or the other. I don't remember exactly the moment. There was a moment in the second half where, given the way the rotation was gone, he could have gone either way, and he went Conchar, and I found that notable. The Kennard thing has been like not surprising to me at all. It's like spectacular 3-point shooting percentages, but doesn't really do much,
Right.
And so I wonder if the coaches are starting to see that, like, whether it's Conchar or in some games it's Roddy, like, what if these other dudes may, like, get some rebounds and get some steals and just sort of create some havoc beyond just, standing on the perimeter and maybe shooting the ball when it comes to you and maybe not,
No, I'm honestly a big supporter of where we are right now with the players that we have, that, like, you just got to play Conchar. Like, Conchar is one of the only guys. Honestly, I feel like that start of the second quarter lineup could have been saved if they just probably left Conchar in. Like, you can't have Roddy and Williams, right. I don't think. Like, just Conchar gets the basketball, and he's basically the only plus rebounder the Grizzlies have right now for his position. And, like, ideally he's not playing the 4, but I think with what you have with Jones and Bane and Jackson, Conchar's always been like an ideal kind of 5th connective piece or a glue guy. Like, if you need him to score on the second unit, no. But, I do. It makes sense to me to lean on Conchar a little bit more. It also helps when Conchar makes a couple shots like he did.
There's just so many low usage guys out there. And Conchar and Kennard together, I just don't love that,
No, I mean, I won't say I love it, but
yeah,
it's what we got to do, I think. Also, more going back to the 48-point quarter, contractually obligated to point out that's the highest scoring first quarter in Grizzlies franchise history. It's the third highest scoring quarter in franchise history, behind that 51-point Clippers thing, like you said, and then last year's 55-point game against the quarter against the Pelicans.
Yep.
They've had 3 of their 5 highest scoring quarters in the past 2 weeks. If you want to throw in the 47-point quarter against the Lakers, where Ja had his 28-point quarter. One thing that's interesting, might just be a random blip, an aberration, but this is something I tracked last year. The Grizzlies last year, when Tyus Jones played over Ja Morant, had, I believe it was, I haven't double checked the stat, something to the effect of, Chris, the Grizzlies had more 70-point halves with Tyus Jones in there than they did with Ja Morant in there.
Well, Ja didn't play in that game against OKC, right? The
73-point win. No, no,
I don't. Yeah.
And then there's the blowout win in the postseason last year against the Warriors, where it was Tyus Jones. I remember tracking, like, in Tyus Jones, I can't remember, like, Tyus Jones started like 20-something games like 22 games or something last year. And the Grizzlies had the same number of blowout wins in those 22 games as they had in the 60 games Ja Morant played. And we're like, is this just a random, they played worse players? But this thing of the Grizzlies scoring more points or having these offensive explosions, the drawback is you have these droughts when you can't score in the fourth quarter, because
that's right.
Like, you don't have the half court spectacular individual creation that Ja provides.
I mean, that's why, despite that one game against Golden State in the playoffs, my reaction even last season to all that was, maybe there's something to this, but to win at the highest levels in the playoffs, like, they have to have Ja Morant. I still think that's true.
Yeah. But hopefully that gives me, like, all right, maybe this regular season we'll be able to crank out some of these over the final 17 games. We'll have 3 or 4 blowouts, or we'll just everything will be clicking, and it won't boil down into that half court struggle that keeps happening. Let's talk a little bit more about the Warriors win, specifically the Dillon Brooks angle to it. We'll do that after this short break. All Grizz all the time. Stay connected and follow at memphisgrizzlies and at Grind City Media across all social channels, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, for breaking news, one-of-a-kind content, and all the perspectives you won't find anywhere else. All right, so I think a lot of the anxiety for Grizzlies fans going into the Warriors game was based on Draymond Green just eviscerating, scathing criticism that cut deep. Basically being like, this is why you're not a championship contender. It's you, Dillon Brooks, which honestly echoes what Andre Iguodala told me in person over the summer. Like, Dillon Brooks is why you guys lost that series, and he's why you're not any good, or something. Clearly there's stuff baked into that the Warriors guys just don't like him.
Right.
I will also point out that Andre Iguodala, since being on the Grizzlies roster, is now 0-3 against the Memphis Grizzlies. He averages 2 points in these games in about 17 minutes per game. Dillon Brooks, by the way, in these 3 matchups is averaging 21 points per game. That's your cherry-picked fun stat. Of course, Andre Iguodala did not play in the playoff series against the Grizzlies last year. But I thought we had this anxiety as a fan base, and it felt like, to me, again, this may be just based on my sample of how I use social media, it felt like Dillon is drawing a lot of ire from our fan base, like Grizzlies fans just kind of turning on him. He missed his last 7 shots in the game against the Lakers. And it's just like our frustrations, which deal with Ja's situation and Steven Adams being hurt and the Grizzlies struggling in the fourth quarters. It's like lasered in on like this really inefficient guy having a terrible year. So I was like, with what Draymond said and how the fan base is feeling, if Dillon has a bad game against the Warriors and we lose, like, how do we come back from that? Like that, I'm like, does he, like, he feels like he has to walk away from the, like, I mean, I guess we're not having any more players walk away from the team, but I was like, we need this. But Dillon back against the wall, yeah, he bricked most of his 3-pointers, but he had a huge game and the Grizzlies get the win. So what was your reaction to Dillon Brooks standing up to Draymond and still being very candid after the game with his comments?
That was one of the great Dillon Brooks nights.
Yeah.
I think it has no meaning for what's going to happen like Saturday night or whatever. Or, it could become a total flaming disaster any second again. So he starts missing some shots and whatever. But that was a high stakes affair for Dillon Brooks. And he was like tap dancing across the high wire or whatever, basically. I mean, it was in the first half alone, he had, I do a list every year of like the best moments of the season. And like that game provided a lot of candidates. And in the first half alone, in succession, he had a moment with each of the 3 like Warriors guys. I mean, there was the first one was when Klay Thompson basically was giving up on a loose ball about to go out of bounds. And he just streaked right by him, grabbed the ball and took it the other way for the dunk. Then there was when he handcuffed Steph Curry in the corner, blocked a shot and started howling. And then, of course, there's when he got nose to nose with Draymond Green. And then more stuff later. Yeah, all-timer. And then even at the end of the game, he forced another turnover right in front of the TNT crew on Curry and was howling. I didn't get to see the game on TV. I forgot to DVR it. I wish I had. Yeah. I was howling. And then in the post game, I was standing there. I was there for the whole time. I was standing right next to him. I'm the one who asked him the question about the referees not calling the technicals, which inspired the they old,
Right. Oh my! Can we just do that whole quote? That's like one of the best.
If you have it,
let me see if I can pull this up.
But it was one of those where he knew.
Here's the quote, Chris. Sorry, this is one of my favorite quotes ever. Especially coming on like other NBA players criticizing referees. Fred VanVleet went off on referee Ben Taylor. Dillon Brooks's quote. I have friendly conversations with the refs. Even though I get intense, I try to talk a little lower and give them their props because the game is so fast and the game is so physical. It's hard for those guys to get up and down, especially some of them. They old. That turn from I'm complimenting the referees to then all of a sudden throwing out like they're old. It was one of the great comedy lines just reading it.
The thing about these Dillon Brooks, when he holds court like this, he puts on the sunglasses. So you go in the locker room, and his locker is sort of right by the entrance. And so he gets dressed and he puts on the sunglasses. He makes a show of like, this is like, this is when I'm ready. This is my transformation. I put on the sunglasses and he knows like he's about to hold court. And even though he has the sunglasses on, you can sort of see the little twinkle in the eye. Like he knows what he's doing. He is totally aware of his effect. This is not Tony Allen, who would say crazy, funny stuff, and he wouldn't even know he said crazy, funny stuff. Dillon Brooks knows he's saying crazy, funny stuff. Like he's for the most part, he's pretty in control of the effects. But it was funny because last night, what they typically do is they bring 2 players to the podium and everyone else just is available in the locker room if they are, right? And so it's going to be Tyus and Jaren. And so Dillon and Jaren came out of the showers about the same time. Their locker rooms are on either side of the door, the entrance. And so everyone starts gathering around Dillon as he's putting on the sunglasses, getting ready to hold court. And I'm standing on the side of the scrum that's next to Jaren's locker. And Jaren sees that and says, I'm going to hurry up and get in there and answer one question and get out of here. And I said, this is your chance. Yeah. And so he went and did his thing in the press conference room which was probably two people in there because everyone's standing around Dillon.
Right.
And then a few minutes later, he comes back in the locker room, and I look over my shoulder, and Jaron has both arms in the air, cheering, like, "Yes, I did it! Like I got out of here in 1 minute." And Dillon's talking for like 12. But I mean, Dillon just held court, man, and there was so much to it. But I thought it was pretty great. He earned it.
He did earn it. I gotta say, frankly, when he was doing the post game on TV interview, like I was nervous. I'm like, Dillon, don't instigate something else. Like Draymond is again, like Draymond spelled out on his podcast, a decorated, all-star games. Right. He was a player of the year.
Well, Dillon
titles.
I didn't see anyone quote this, and I was generous enough to Dillon. To me, Dillon earned me not using this quote.
Yeah,
but because I did a whole sidebar on the Dillon thing, but I could use every quote. It would have been 2,000 words instead of 1,200, right? Yeah. But at one point, he did say about Draymond Green, "I'm better than him." And then he started to explain why he was a better basketball player than Draymond Green. And his explanation did not really hold up to scrutiny, much in the way that Draymond Green's explanation of why, Dillon gets technicals and he doesn't sometimes did not hold up to scrutiny.
Yeah, of course. I only get technicals when I want to, is what Draymond said.
Yeah. And so I just let that Dillon Brooks, let me tell you why I'm a better player than Draymond Green. I let that sort of slide on by.
Wow. Is that the right decision? Should you throw that out into the, I mean,
it wasn't as pertinent and as good as the other stuff I was using.
So the one thing that Dillon Brooks, I think, fairly poked back at Draymond, because Draymond says, he said that your teammates don't like playing with you. That's one thing that Draymond accused or threw against Dillon. Dillon spelled out very correctly, I don't get in physical altercations with my teammates, which is something that Draymond Green has obviously done. We have to give the kudos to me for Dillon. He tied a season high with 6 assists in this game. I
don't know if this is going to be Grizzlies glossary worthy the way kudos to me was.
Yeah. But
when asked about the Draymond Green evisceration of Dillon Brooks before the game, Taylor Jenkins allowed that he had seen it and described it as competitive banter.
So Draymond is loath to call what is going on between the Grizzlies and the Warriors as a rivalry.
Yeah.
And again, if you going up against 0 titles to a dynasty with 4 titles, there's no comparison between the Grizzlies and the Warriors. But I looked this up. In the Draymond and Steph Curry era, this is going back to 2013, including the playoffs, the Warriors are 29-22 against the Grizzlies. That's a 57% win percentage. That is much lower than their overall win percentage.
Right.
I mean, you can't compare, again, winning titles. You can't compare winning playoff series.
To me.
So the Grizzlies do win games against the Warriors, and they did end their season in the play-in game. So again, we're not comparing the two franchises, all-time greats against an upstart young team, but the Grizzlies have won, 43% of their games.
That's the point I was going to make about that play-in game. To me, that's the part of the story that's been memory holed by the Warriors and by a lot of the media who covers it. These two teams have eliminated each other alternately the past 2 seasons, right? Yes, the Warriors eliminated the Grizzlies. That's the higher seed last season in the postseason. The year before that, the Grizzlies eliminated the Warriors as the higher seed. Yeah. They went in to their building. Yeah. And yes, Klay Thompson was not in that game, but Steph Curry and Draymond Green were in that game, and Jordan Poole was in that game, and Andrew Wiggins was in that game, and I think Kevon Looney, like all these guys were in that game, and the Grizzlies were like 22 years old, and they went into like whatever their arena is called now and eliminated them from the postseason. Like that happened, right? You can tell me like games in March don't matter. That game mattered.
Yeah. It's a good one. A couple more stats before we get out of here, and then I want to ask you just about Ja Morant and what we know. Tyus Jones now has 5 20-point 10 assist games this season. Of course, he had 0 coming into the season. He's, as a starter, Tyus Jones averaging 19.3 points per game, 7.9 assists per game. This season, the Grizzlies got over 30 assists. They're 11-1 this season. We're recording over 30 assists. The one loss was the Clippers game where they fell apart at the end. The Grizzlies' weakness, as we know, without Steven Adams, is going to be rebounding. I felt like the Grizzlies the matchup with the Warriors was good for this situation. Like not having Andrew Wiggins, they played a lot of small ball lineups.
They started 4 guards.
They started 4 guards. Like where everything has fallen apart for the Grizzlies in the past few games has been that start of the fourth quarter. The Warriors thankfully started Ty Jerome and Patrick Baldwin and JaMychal Green with Draymond and Tur. I was like, thank you. I was texting with Warriors people, like my Warriors friends, and I was like, hey, what's up with this lineup? And they were like, it's so horrible. Like, why are we doing this? It honestly felt
we see your Zaire Williams and we raise you a Patrick Baldwin. That was kind of what was going on.
So the Grizzlies held on there. Let's finish with the Ja Morant stuff. Of course, not going to come back at least for 3 more games. Is there any, I guess, is there anything that I don't know that you know that you can share with us? And is there any thought also, have you heard from anyone with the Grizzlies? Like, is there an expectation once Ja Morant, if Ja Morant says he's good to go, that the league is going to step in and also assign a punishment?
I think part of this is let's call this informed speculation.
Okay.
I think there's definitely an element of waiting for the league, the expectation that the league will do something, I'm guessing. And he is away from the team at the team's instigation, but they have not called it a suspension. It is not technically a suspension. I think that, again, this is speculation. I think it is not being called a suspension because the expectation of a league suspension of some kind. And I think there's some kind of CBA rule against there being a team suspension and a league suspension for the same thing, you know?
Oh, okay.
And so I think the expectation is there may be some kind of league penalty, and maybe the games he has already been setting out would be folded into that, right? Yeah. And so, I'm just wildly speculating here, but maybe the NBA says, okay, 10-game suspension, and that dates to when the Grizzlies took him off the floor. Or something like that. I don't know if that's going to be the case.
That's like a college sports thing. Is that? I mean, this is what I don't know. Has that ever happened?
I don't know
in
that
the
this
NBA
is going to happen.
Where they give you like credit for game served or something?
Again, I don't know that this is going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me. I would be sure that the Grizzlies and the NBA have been in some level of consultation, about how things are being handled. I do know that, not only is there an ongoing NBA investigation, but the Grizzlies are very much waiting to find out what comes of that. Now, that said, if the NBA came out tomorrow and said, we're not doing anything, I don't think Ja would be on the floor the next game. So I think even beyond waiting for this NBA conclusion, there is a process for the Grizzlies to be comfortable with bringing Ja back in. You put it all together, I do think he is likely to be back this season.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of tea leaf reading and speculation by everyone. But even beyond that, no one actually knows.
Sure.
Like I think if you gave Zach Kleiman truth serum, he would not be able to tell you what the outcome of this is going to be.
Yeah,
he doesn't know.
Yeah. Well, on that happy note, no, let's do a random. I actually have a question. Should the Grizzlies for the rest of the regular season, should they look like at adding a different 2-way player? Like,
well, that's an interesting question.
Like for the regular season, like is there a big in the G League that could help right now?
Okay,
and thus they would get rid of Vince Williams or Kenneth Lofton Jr. If you're not going to play Kenneth Lofton Jr. Yeah, good
for you for being in the realm of the realistic on this. Yeah, I've heard so much speculation. I've been asked by so many people, like, what big do you going to go out and sign? I'm like, that's not the way it works. You have no roster spots. You can't you get an injury exception? No, I'm pretty sure the answer is no to that.
Yeah, it was definitely no. The deadline passed. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's injury exceptions. There's also roster exemptions. There's various kind of things.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't think any of them apply to the current moment.
Yeah.
Like if the Grizzlies had 4 players out for an extended amount of time, I think they could get a roster exemption, but that is not the case at the moment.
So you're telling me we need a Jeff Galooly I'm just kidding.
Right.
It's obvious parody.
So I think there are mechanisms at this point where things you could, but none of them apply to the Grizzlies at this moment.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I think could, but I don't know. Are 2-way players allowed in the playoffs? That's what I can't remember.
No.
Right. And so,
I'm talking about limping to the finish line. I'm talking about limping to the finish line with an extra big.
It's interesting
in your
to
rotation.
me that it's interesting to me that you say Lofton and not Williams.
Well, I said both.
Okay.
I listed both.
All right.
I also specifically said, if you're not going to play Kenneth Lofton, would you desperately need a big? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, he's not really.
It is interesting to me that the two-way guys for the Grizzlies have basically not played this season for the Grizzlies.
Right.
And to me, with Lofton, I'm not clear what their long-range prospects are with Lofton, but when they signed him, that was a long-range prospect kind of guy.
Right.
And so the fact that he hasn't played, that's fine. But the Vince Williams thing, to me, you want one of those two-way spots to be like, a 4A player who can help you out in a pinch. And the fact that they have not gotten that from either of those spots, to me, is somewhat of a failure of the utility of those spots.
What's Killian Tilly up to? I mean,
that's a good question. I think he's not playing anywhere near.
I mean, I'm with you that I think both of the guys, Vince Williams Jr. and Kenneth Lofton Jr., they're projects, they're developmental things.
Right.
I also kind of feel like we might have passed the point of that luxury where you get to have 5 projects.
Oh, I think if they had a third string center type, instead of Vince Williams, and that one of those two ways, you would have gotten a lot more utility out of that this season. I think there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and So again, I it doesn't feel like they would do anything, but that I believe that's a mechanism they could use to add someone 6'10" who can jump and rebound. Again, I don't know anything about the G League. I don't even know if there's any 6'10" guys in there that, worth playing any minutes in an NBA game right now. But anyways, Chris, thanks so much for coming on. As always, everybody out there, make sure you listen to the Daily Memphians podcast. Read Drew Hill and Chris's coverage of the Grizzlies over at the Daily Memphian. And Chris, I look forward to the next time.
All right. Thanks, Keith.